Hello and welcome to Meet the Manager. My name is Joe. Our regular catch up with the best advice from some of the community's most notable FPL managers continues. Yes, we focus on those with an incredible rank history, but we're adding to that by including managers with an interesting story to tell. We'll also focus on managers offering a unique insight into the game. My name is Joe, and today I'm joined by, once again, Greyhead, who, like us at Meet the Manager, is focusing on some of the best managers in the game through his Great and the Good League, which is on Fantasy Football Scout. Do search for that. Greyhead, welcome. How are you?
Very well. Absolutely delighted to be back on talking to you, Joe. We're in the midst of my free hit during a game week 22. So it's I think we're at half time. I think it's fair to say
Yes.
in terms of judging how successful it's been. So
Yes.
hoping for better.
It's good to timestamp this. It definitely.
Yeah.
We're looking ahead to game week 23. We're in the middle of game week 22. This series is designed really for people to look at whenever they want, really, years to come, or just because we're getting the insight from the best. So what we're doing with this time is a little different. We've got you in here because this is a sort of season so far recap. We're taking advantage of this period in the quite crazy COVID impacted winter of the 21-22 season to have a look at some of your top managers in the great and the good, and some of those that we focus in Meet the Manager, which includes yourself, and how they've been doing over the season so far. See if we can really learn anything. So we'll sort of start with your research, and then I'll do a little bit at the end about just a recap on some of the Meet the Manager managers so far. What I'll do is I'll put the list of your Great and the Good League as it stands so far, and this shows that as Fabio Borgia, FPL General, are the ones in and around the top 10,000. And Mark Southern's bringing up the rear with the inventor of Fantasy Football Scouts, but I'm sure he won't be there for long. Les, who was unfortunately one of the many victims of being hacked, unfortunately. So we've got his score of what it should be prior to that hack. And then myself, Jeff and Yavuz in and around the top 100k. So that's who we are. So yes, we've got a few. You've got a few stats and things. What do you want to start with then?
I think what I'd probably like to do is, because I think that the season itself has kind of been broken down into a few stages, if you like. So one of the reasons that I do the league or track these managers, and as you were saying, some are good, some are very good managers, but I think most of all I kind of track these managers because they're kind of very engaged in the actual obviously in FPL. So and also a lot of them have kind of good stories to tell and different styles. So personally, I find it useful just to kind of check in and see how they get on, and then also look back as well, because I think just by looking at how they've kind of performed over the season, you can learn some lessons. And I'm a great believer that you can learn not only from you can learn from anyone, I think, in my mind, in terms of the managers available. So these are some of the ones that I track. But what I've done is it's just kind of almost done a half-time report on these managers to get a sense of what's happened so far. And the way I kind of generally would say the season has gone to date was that it's kind of gone into kind of 4-5-ish kind of stages, if you like. So we started off where template was king, and I'll come on to that in a minute. Then we had lots of noise about the awful word freemium came to know, which is also about Lukaku, Ronaldo, and Salah, and the kind of promise around that. Then there was very much a switch to big at the back actually became a reality. And then, obviously, more recently, we are in the times where it's COVID chaos. So, literally just trying to work out week from week, what is going to happen, how we're going to react, and how we do it. So, using those 4 stages, I've kind of picked out some data.
So, I mean, all seasons have stories within a story, but this season especially, I think this has been a season of many seasons, and for a manager like me who's quite patient, the COVID chaos element of the season is an absolute horror show. because you can't plan, you can't. It's really difficult to look ahead and get those target players in, because you just got to react quickly from week to week. And if you've got family and kids, and it's just really hard work. But the strength in the template is much better for managers like me. But however, some other managers, more risk takers, might be able to adjust more to those COVID cusps. So I guess there's some of the narratives we're looking at. Do you want to? I've got a slide here. It says template start. So I'll put that up, and then you can explain what we're looking at here. So yeah.
Yeah. No. So I think last time we spoke, I think it's fair to say that all these managers are, they've got a good rank. I think the lowest is about 150k. But as you rightly mentioned, I think there's at least half of them in the top 50, top 60 at the moment. So they've all done well. And we were talking about, why is that the case? Why have they all done so well? And I think looking back at those different phases, the different narrative of the story, that first narrative was very much around the template and how strong it was. So, and I want to just kind of look back and say, well, no, did the data support that, or is it actually a fallacy? So, but when you look at this, what I've got here is effectively pulling data from our friend Ragaboli on Live FPL. He obviously does a template, almost like percentage, if you like, based on how similar squads are to the top 10k, and then I looked at the ranking when it came to game week 4. So almost like, depending on how template team, how well they did, and that was a very simple kind of color coding. So green is obviously very much aligned to the template. And I think this kind of highlights that at the start it was such a strong template, and it worked, and everyone did very well as a result. When I look back at the squad there, everyone had Salah, everyone had Bruno, everyone had Trent, everyone had Antonio, and then you had the people we probably don't have in our squads now, people like Luke Shaw and Simicast, for example. But it was just a very solid core, and it like I say, it worked. It proved successful. So someone like Tom Stevenson, who was very close to that template, did very well as a result.
So yeah, I mean, that just shows. I mean, I speak for myself, but I know lots of managers and lots of engaged managers who follow on Twitter and Fantasy Football Scout. There was a strong start, and there was a feeling of optimism about so many of us. That wow, I'm in the top 100k in the first 2 or 3 weeks. This is it. This is the one. I'm going to win it. And then gradually, reality and the various narratives you've been talking about, those 4 or 5 narratives suddenly came into play, and we've had to play different games. So I mean, one of those things that's changed was looking at wildcards. So I've got a slide here, so wildcard impact as well. So I've got a minus next to my name here. So with trepidation, I'll put it up. So wildcard impact.
No, I thought this one was quite interesting because it kind of talks about the timing of the wildcard and how to use the wildcard. And when I think back to how I've used a wildcard in the past, I kind of associate it more. Does my team look pretty awful? Therefore, I need to wildcard. Whereas I think over time, what I've looked at is actually, can you be slightly more thoughtful in terms of actually kind of planning when your wildcard is gonna take place to sync in with fixture swings in the season that lies. So I really want to just kind of take a look at when the various managers in this league kind of time their fixed at that time their wildcard, what impact that had over a kind of 5-week period. So just from before the rank before they play their wildcard to 5 weeks later, and it's just trying to understand what's happening around that time. Can we actually learn anything in terms of when it should be played? And basically, what it shows is that the ones that obviously time their wild card towards that towards that kind of game week 8, maybe even kind of game week 7 time, are the ones that actually kind of gained the most rank.
Okay.
And if you think about what was happening around that time, that was a time that we saw the switch to Chelsea's much more promising fixtures. We saw City improve, and that was the time that there was that almost like that move to investing in your defensive players. So that's when, you know, now we've got almost like we're in a place where everyone's got Trent, everyone's got Cancelo, and then probably a kind of another Chelsea or another City defender.
So that was the time when that sort of started. So these guys who wildcarded then could just get onto that quick, whereas those who perhaps wildcarded before were having to use transfers and hits to get to that if they wanted, and those who hadn't wildcarded yet at all, obviously similar thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, it's just something to think about as I'm going to go forward in future seasons. Just, you know, can I be more deliberate in terms of when I play that wild card rather than be reactive? Because I think by picking those times, I think that kind of that shows here anyway. It's certainly been successful this time round compared to when some of the other managers have played their wild card.
Yeah, I remember in times in the past with successful wildcards for myself and other people. I remember it's that key pivotal fixture swing, and it's particularly around Man City. I remember in times before doing that. So I think the lesson to learn here would be, if you see that fixture swing like we saw with Chelsea and Man City, go for that, and don't be afraid to wildcard into that, something that's going to last you on paper at least 4 to 5, 6 weeks or so.
Absolutely. I think the timing of it was key, especially this year. I think the ones that did time their wildcard earlier this year, I get it, because I think it was trying to take advantage of that freemium we talked about, trying to get Ronaldo in, which obviously didn't kind of work out as well, but obviously successful. And then the ones that timed it later, obviously looking at kind of swings. I think it was going to be a swing towards United later on in that season, and also the mighty Brentford at the time as well. But I think for me, it's just something to consider when you're looking at your wild card. And I think we could also think about it even for this season. So when I'm looking at my wild card for this season, even in all the chaos, I think we could predict that, you know, come game week 31 onwards, we're going to see plenty of doubles. So that's when you should be thinking about looking at your wild card there.
Definitely. So, as we can see there, as FPL General, Fabio, Tom, and so far did very well with their game week 8. I mean, all of those are positive in different degrees, and it shows. I mean, to speak for myself, there as one of the game week 4 people. Yes, I went down there. I'm back up again, and I think I got up to about 60k at some point as well. Yeah. But what you were saying, if I'd have perhaps waited, and game week 8, I could have been higher, and that's something, a lesson for perhaps all of those watching and listening who perhaps wildcarded in game week 4. The game week 10 wildcard. It's just Matthew and Mark there. They haven't done well from that. So what was the problem with that one?
I think they obviously they left it too late, effectively. So when I look at what they did in those wildcards, the actual moves they make were fairly minimum, if you like. And it was actually bringing in. It was actually at the time it's a kind of jump on the form of Chilwell, because obviously Chilwell was looking explosive, and I think they were very unlucky then that Chilwell's injury came about, and also they were jumping on the Brentford swing, if you like. So I think they both tripled up on Brentford, because that was a team to seem to be, you know, you get your Tonys, Mbemo, or however you pronounce that. I always pronounce those that wrongly, so apologies for that. But however, investing those was seen as being a kind of good strategy with the fixtures. But again, as a team, they kind of haven't quite lived up to that potential. So again, it's kind of taking advantage, trying to jump onto a fixture swing of sorts, but it just didn't really kind of pan out.
I guess a lesson there could be, if you see a fixture swing for a lesser team, well then just, you don't have to rearrange your team for that. You could just maybe get one of their assets in. But for those like Chelsea and City, Liverpool, I guess as well, these would be the ones to target. Yeah, I found that interesting there. Next slide. Formation. So this is the sort of the story of the season so far in terms of what everyone's how they're lining up. Whether it's 3-4-3 or big at the back. So yeah, take us through what's been happening here with formation with these managers.
Well, yeah, certainly over the last few seasons, ever since I've been following them or writing the articles on Team, the preferred formation has always been 3-4-3.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some slight variation towards 3-5-2, but it's always been. There's also felt like a comfort blanket, if you like, to go back to 3-4-3 has been the way forward. But absolutely, in terms of this season, you can see that the investment has swung to move towards that four. There's four defensive players, and I think again going back to being flexible in your approach, being able to kind of read the room, if you like, in terms of how the season is going. Those managers who have kind of moved early to that kind of 3-4 at the back have kind of prospered. Certainly, I think from about the kind of the game week 13, 14, 15, that type of time, the likes of Fabio and FPL General have done well. And if just picking on Fabio for a bit, so in terms of the way he's invested it, he's very much kind of stuck with having two City defenders in his team, Trent as well, and then he kind of brought in James around that time, and then has kind of recently swapped him out. But my point here is again that kind of the flexibility. So I think on the last discussion we had, we were talking about, do you have preferred formation? I think to answer your question again would be, I think it's just you have to be flexible. You have to go with where the value is at any point in a season. I think the ability to flex is kind of reflected here as well.
I mean, I think with the COVID section of this season, I imagine many other managers, I've tried not to have any. I've tried to have all players that I can play. I mean, unfortunately, I like many others maybe still have Livramento, who is injured, but nevertheless. The attempt there is to try and get as many, because each week I don't know what formation is best at the moment. So you can see here, game weeks 13 to 16, we suddenly had this 5-3-2, and there was 11. Was that 11 times, or was that's been used during that time? And then 4-4-2, interestingly, in the current COVID section, 27 times, absolute runaway formation. And I guess that shows that it's sort of in the middle, isn't it? People are capable of doing 3-4-3, capable of 5 at the back, but they're sort of plumping for 4-4-2. It's a bit of everything, bit of defenders, bit of midfield, still getting some attackers in there. And 3-4-3 from game weeks 1 to 4, 36 times, and then just twice. It's just gone.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. No, and I think it's like you say, there's a combination of terms of investing where the value is in the big at the back, but also, as you rightly said, kind of COVID. Yeah. So I think a look at a lot of what the manager have done is they can't afford to have that that 4.0 defender that doesn't play, and so actually having a kind of strong squad and actually having defensive players who will play has meant that it's kind of switched towards that. So Livramento, until his injury, was a gift this season because we knew he was going to play. But even going up beyond that, we still made sure if it wasn't an extra City or Chelsea defender to double at the back, you had someone like Ben White who, well, fixtures permitting, was normally meant to play as well. So I think there's been certainly as we've hit the kind of the turmoil of the fixtures and rearrangements, it's become even more important to make sure you've got 15 playing players, really.
It just occurred to me, in terms of narrative, when the Liverpool attackers like Salah and Mane return from AFCON, in fact, all the AFCON players return. Chelsea eventually returned from the Club World Championship. COVID eases, hopefully, as we get into warmer weather. What's the next narrative going to be? Do you think it will return back? Everyone will have 3-4-3 again, and Captain Salah?
I think we probably will see a shift back towards 3-4-3. It's very much I think the next phase for me will be everyone is hopefully making plans for getting Salah back in. That's the kind of the next piece. And then
Yeah.
I think also being prepared to take hits during what is going to continue to be obviously reschedules and chaos for the next few weeks. For me, it depends on what's going to happen, post game week 30, for example, because obviously that's when we're more likely to see the doubles, and hopefully there might be a bit more normality in terms of the COVID situation. So I think that's where it's going to be. That's going to be the next narrative in terms of actually how you plan for that. And then I think within that time, you'll see managers feel more comfortable to have non-playing players on their squad, and then therefore they probably will see a switch back to 3-4-3 where they feel a bit more comfortable with that normality.
I mean, one thing I've been thinking, and I don't know whether the other viewers or listeners have as well, is what's burnt me and perhaps others this season has been investing in those premium strikers. Lukaku didn't live up to expectations. Ronaldo, through injury, and Manchester United, it's not sort of gelling for him and them in general. And I'm just thinking, well, I do like 2 or 3 strikers, but I am thinking of Antonio, Dennis, Calvert-Lewin, Watkins, Ings. I'm thinking of these types of players, and I'm not really thinking. So, do you think that the new 3-4-3 perhaps won't have a Kane or a Ronaldo?
Yeah, I mean, again, looking at, like you said, those heavy hitters up front have not really performed. Actually, invest in some of those mid-price and even kind of lower budget options, because I still think Broha is a very good option. He's only 5.1. He's fine if he doesn't play every week. He'll come on and do something every now and again. So I'm a big fan of him. Obviously, you've got the Watford strikers who are cheap as well. So I see the 3-4-3 being where you actually look at the more mid-price kind of cheaper strikers and then look to kind of fill at your midfield where all the money's where all the value is right now anyway.
So we mentioned captaincy, we mentioned Mo Salah there. So that's really been the captaincy story of the season. Our reliance on Mohamed Salah has been amazing as a captain option. When he's gone, some people can do well. Those who captained Fernandes this week, and some less well. Those who captained, say, a Ronaldo. So we're sort of flailing without him as managers. But let's have a look. I've got next slide of captaincy here. So yeah, what's the story? I mean, Mo Salah is huge there, but yeah, what's the general story really for the captaincy for us all?
Yeah, it's all about Mo, I'm afraid. And so Mo is dominated, but and again, I think what's interesting here is that again that's suited people whereby they have a set captain each week, and then they can use there, and then the captaincy isn't really as much as kind of a swing factor, if you like, in terms of their rank. But what has been interesting as you look at, again, obviously, first of all, captaincy is a big factor in terms of how well the managers have performed. I've ranked the names basically the managers basically are according to where they were ranked in game week 20. So again, it's kind of half-time report. So again, it shows captaincy is a big deal. But what is interesting here is again your style as a manager. So depending on how comfortable you feel with taking risks, because I think there have been opportunities during the season to kind of bet against Mo. Obviously, certainly now when he's not around. When we look at some of these managers, Magnus is a big one to kind of bet against the trend. But I should say he doesn't do it every week. I mean, he's captain Mo the majority, but he's one of the unfortunate souls who went for Havertz. Back in was it game week 9? I think it was where he did that. But also. I guess he's done it just this week past. So he was one that bet against Ronaldo and decided to go with Bruno. So that's kind of paid off. So again, I think the lesson here is know yourself, know what you're comfortable in terms of risk. It can, but also be prepared to take the highs and lows. So again, there's the example there of Magnus has taken a low in terms of Havertz, but has been rewarded recently in terms of the high as well. So I think that's being comfortable with risk and knowing what kind of manager you are is a key thing I'd pick up.
Yeah, I mean that's I mean, for those that like the security of a familiar face like Salah, it's been good. But yeah, you're right. For those that like to gamble on a manager, the Havertz one, I think that's really stung. I think that's going to really impact managers for years to come. They'll still remember, oh yeah, I was badly burnt there, and it might put some off. But then you mentioned that as Captain Foden in game week 20, and Antonio in game week 6, so he took some risks there, went against the template there, and really paid off. So it can
exactly. And again, it's a similar point. It goes back to how comfortable you are. I mean, as with all these things, when it comes to captaincy, you've got to pick your week, as it were. So I think it's picking your week, and then also just being able to kind of, shake it off. So going back to your point, are you someone that's going to be affected by the Havertz horror for the rest of the season and going forward? Are you someone who's going to feel kind of comfortable knowing that it didn't come off this time, but you can have another go in a few weeks when the moment arises?
I've got another slide here. It says squad depth and bench strength. So yeah, what's the story of these managers so far this season in terms of their squad depth and their bench strength?
Yeah, so this goes back to the point you were making around COVID and around the number of cancellations and changes that we've had, or last minute changes we've had to kind of adapt to, certainly during the latter part of the season. But I think one point here was that what's interesting here is that even before we hit, obviously, the chaos that exists at the moment, there was some rotation kind of building up from kind of game week 8 onwards. So I think what's interesting here is, again, that the ability of managers to kind of flex and adapt their style. So again, the likes of Fabio here have actually kind of invested more in their squad and more in their bench to make sure that they've always got their cover. We're seeing more of these managers actually now got 2 playing keepers. So we kind of used to have that trend a couple of years ago where everyone had 2 4.5 and you rotated, etc. But we seem to have shifted away from that at the start of this season, where you just kind of picked your one keeper, which is normally Sanchez at the time, and you kind of went, right, I'm gonna ride it out. Whereas because of what's happened with all the rotation and the chaos, I think that the managers who have been able to invest in their squad and get that strength have actually been kind of rewarded and done better. So I think that's the kind of the key thing from there, recognizing the chaos is coming and recognizing that you need to invest in your bench as a result.
So yeah, looking at this table here in terms of auto subs, so the number of substitutes that came in through rotation or injury or COVID, it was looking like game weeks 5 to 8 and 13 to 16 seemed to be, there was a lot of that, but it seems to have game weeks 17 to 20 sort of evened down. Not that many have been used. So what does that indicate? Because I would have thought in that period it would have been a huge amount of bench points coming in.
It's more a reflection we didn't have enough players, to be honest. So it was that bad. We didn't even have the subs to call on when it came to that point. So
I see. I just wanted to clarify that because it goes against what you would think. But yes, you're right. Thinking my own team, they just haven't had the numbers.
No, I mean more and more. I mean, during that period, we saw teams with just nine players getting out, as it were. So. That was what kind of impacted there. So it was that kind of that period up to that bit where there was the most kind of call on the bench, as it were. But I mean, like I say, even at the start of the season, there was a lot more need to call to your bench. So as I remember using you as an example, don't I? Up to game week 12, even that first 12 weeks, you had 8 auto subs during that period. Compared to last season, where you'd made kind of 1 or 2 auto subs have come on. So I think as we go into the fact that we have the bigger teams where we naturally kind of invest our times do tend to rotate more, I think it does mean that you are going to have to naturally kind of always make sure you've got more of that squad. So certainly we're in a time where I think having at least kind of two playing subs is key, really.
And I guess the total auto sub points, that's key as well, because the players you've got on the bench that are coming in, that are being subbed in, aren't your 1 and 2 point ones. It's the ones that could get an assist or a goal. It could be the odd 6 or 7 points here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, again, just to use Fabio as an example. So it's a bit of an extreme example, but in game week 20, his bench was Bowen, which he actually regrets because he got a double-digit haul that week, but also had Pukki and also Ben White as well. So 3 players who aren't bad, but they were actually on his bench that week. So it's a bit of an extreme point, but you can't get away with just fodder, I'm afraid.
Not many or none have used their bench boost yet.
No.
So I imagine that's going to be another sort of narrative in the season to come, how the bench boost is constructed, because we've all, as managers this season, learnt a bit more about our benches. We've seen a bit more of our benches. We think, oh, I didn't realise Diop was there, and so on. Okay. Let's have a look at transfer hits. So I know what hits are. I know what transfers are. What's transfer hits? I'll put a slide up and you can tell us all.
Yeah, no, it's basically kind of effectively kind of hits, as it were, or that they've taken over the season. And again, it's a similar story really, whereby people have had to adapt their style. So going back to what we were saying at the start, I'm very similar to you. I don't like taking hits. I'm a very cautious manager. I should probably be not quite as cautious as I am. So. But all the managers you can see here is, as the season has gone on, have just had to feel comfortable.
It's quite striking, isn't it?
It is absolutely. I mean, it's almost like every week now, I think pretty much all managers are going on a -4 just to make sure that they've got a starting 11. And you just have to feel, comfortable with it.
I can't remember the last time I didn't take a hit to field 11. You just have to, but they're here. So for those listening to the podcast version, basically what this slide is showing in terms of transfer hits is that there's not many early on, the odd -4, the occasional -8, and then when you look at game week 17 to 20, well, I'm on -28 in terms of points, so I've taken 7. Others are on -20, -24, and so on. So that's the picture we're looking at there. This shows the impact that COVID has had on this particular narrative.
I think so, and also for me, kind of hopefully it illustrates that. Again, we shouldn't really class managers as being kind of maverick and dullard when it comes to the hits, as it were. I think for me, it's all about when is it right for your team to take hits, and when is it going to make sense. So obviously, right now it makes sense to get out playing a full playing 11. But even before then, when I look at some of the hits that were taken, so FPL Matthew, who's a very cautious manager by trade, he took quite a lot. He took a -8 towards the start of the season, but it was for a long-term benefit in terms of, he allowed him to bring in he brought in kind of Ronaldo at the time, and he's also able to bring in Livramento and Jota, etc. So I guess my overall point here is don't try and get boxed into either being a cautious manager or not. Really, you have to kind of flex it and be ready to do what you need to do to get your team in the right state.
You've got to mix it up, and this season in particular here. So I've got some stats about the 10 managers or so that I've interviewed for Meet the Manager here. So it's not so comprehensive. One is that I don't want to repeat exactly the same things. 2 is I'm really lazy. so I haven't done as much, but I've done a bit, and hopefully this will add to the discussion about the season so far. 4 seasoned, engaged and good managers, great and good managers. This is just some simple stats I gathered just in general about the managers. on Meet the Manager. Do have a look on the channel. We've got a separate section with Meet the Manager. Do have a look, because they're all different, including yourselves, and all in different, all got different strategies, and they've had to deploy different strategies. So the formation so far, on the whole, that has been used has been 3-4-3 and 4-4-2, which tallies what you were saying. The 3-4-3 everyone went for, and then everyone moved to more big at the back, and I think more the seasoned engaged managers have sort of gone for the middle. They're sort of neither one nor the other. I'm not prepared to have 5 at the back. I'm not prepared to lose all my strikers, so 4-4-2 is sort of a happy medium. But 4-5-1 has been the best amongst all of the managers. I found out, I looked at their average scores for each of those formations, and the one that came out the most is 4-5-1, and then 3-5-2. And the common theme there is something that I thought at the beginning of the season, I think we all thought, invest in your midfield, because they're the ones, and that is proving the case still. So there's still something is the same this season, which is good. This is the very similar bit. Captain Salah, pretty similar to your findings here. Handed the armband 14 times on average by each of the managers I've interviewed so far, and the average captains they used was around 5, which is very similar, really. Stick with Salah, occasionally move off. In terms of ranks, this, including yourself, the ones we picked from Meet the Manager so far, doing really well. The average is 58,702. This was going into Game Week 22. It could be even higher now. So that proves that they're all doing really well if the average is that. So some very strong ones there. And the highest going into Game Week 22 is Vanya. And those who've watched his one, Vanya is a former professional footballer, still plays semi-pro in Ukraine. His interesting insight into the game was looking at players and saying, I know what's going through their head, or why is that player not scoring? Why is that player scoring? He knows what's happening on the pitch much more than, but he's also very good at FPL. So he is now, I wanted to focus a little bit on him because he's now up to 256. And so he could win it. You never know. So this is his team Game Week 22 so far. I saw this and I thought, wow, because I thought that at the time when I was interviewing him, I thought, you know your stuff with FPL, but he's on 73 points, and obviously there's those sliding door moments. This week, what is the sliding door moment for Game Week 22? Fernandes. Get Fernandes in and captain him, and that's what he did. So he's got 28 points from him, so he's on 73. Game week rank of 33k so far. So far, this is all could all change, but I wanted to just highlight him a little bit because I've got his season so far. And here we go. I put his Twitter address up there, winter_2_close. So do check him out. But his season so far typifies sort of what you've been talking about, really, about these sort of season of many narratives. And a manager like Vanya has hit all of them. He's got that template. So his overall rank at the start was 253,000 up to it was in the top 100k by game week 4. And then he timed his wild card really well. I mean, just initially, he got an initial 22, 23 point return. So it was 77 points he got from his game week 5 wild card. Wow, the average that week was 55. So he immediately, bang, got a return. And it showed. And it propelled him up from within that, if you're taking that 5-week window. So he went from 17, well, he went right up to 17, 18k. And then within that time, he was well into the top 5k suddenly with the use of that wild card. And then he free hit in game week 19. So this has been another thing. We get another free hit this season. Yeah. I actually gained with my one, but I gained from a very low base because I hardly had any players. So naturally, I would have done better. But Vanya's done really well with his game week 19. And that propelled him from just in time the top 1,000 to inside the top 500. So he's been in and around there ever since. So
yeah, I think the free hit's an interesting one because, like you say, they've all been given a second one. So I mean, I think, and again, when I look at some of the managers in the ones that I track, I mean, some of them have already played it earlier on. Some of it has still got to go as well. So I think that could be another decisive moment yet. Unfortunately, I'm not really the soothsayer to say when it's going to be most effective to play that chip. But already some of them very well out of it. So I think Magnus played it a couple of weeks ago. He did very well, for example. So so I think again that could be quite a key one to know when to play it. So I think the brave souls who leave it towards the final straight could either do very well or maybe not quite as well as the ones now. So.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in my case, I was faced with a -12 or a free hit.
Yeah.
So I think I worked out I was about 20 points up. Yeah. But nevertheless, that was included removing Ronaldo, who scored that week, and bringing in Salah really and captaining him, who got his first 0 in 177 appearances. So despite that failure, it was still a success. But that's for my team. But other teams, like for example Vanya, they've used it much more aggressively. They've been okay, but then they've used it to take the plunge.
No, absolutely. And I think also another interesting point you mentioned there was just he's someone who understands how footballers think. And I do think there is something in that. So as I said, I mean, some of the people I track are people who are kind of well-known engaged managers, but there's obviously other people that I talk to in various kind of, as you're aware, I run or help run the community tournament, and that's allowed me to speak to various people. And there's one on there, Geordie, who's a current footballer, and he gives a completely different perspective to some of the other players. I've got someone else as part of that group who's very, very new to FPL, so Tom. But again, it's a different perspective. So I think if anything, all this kind of proves that there's different views are helpful as you look to kind of build your own team and build your own style as well.
I mean, I think this week with the example of Vanya with Fernandes, exactly that point you were talking about knowing players. So we could all see that Fernandes and Ronaldo's not sort of working for Manchester United. But I think other people had seen in the matches without Ronaldo where Fernandes has played something that's not shown up in the stats, and it hasn't really shown up in output in terms of goals and assists. But what has shown up is maybe it's an expression on his face, maybe it's a body language. But what people have noticed is how he, as a player, looks like he's thriving on the pitch without Ronaldo, and people have picked up on that and taken a gamble this week because stats-wise, I think he had 2 shots, 2 goals, 1 chance. That's but it's something that we can't quantify. It's he's obviously enjoying playing without Ronaldo,
and there's also a degree of luck and fortune, obviously. Because I'm sure many will point out that first shot was not guaranteed to go in until Martinez did what he did. But there is definitely a degree of a kind of fortune in all these things as well. But yeah, I mean, and I think the other thing is it's again another thing this season has been. Just by being more engaged as managers, I think it feels quite tough for everyone at the moment, especially for the ones that feel that we like to plan. I don't like it, but just if we can just kind of get through this, just by the fact that we are engaged and we do happen to know, or we can make an educated guess that the North London derby is going to get called off, or people send you Instagram pictures of Ronaldo at various airports and so forth. It kind of just by being engaged, I think our ranks will be. We'll get through it, put it that way, and then it will allow us to strike as it gets later on in the season.
I definitely want the season to I want to get through it
to end,
but I just want to get through it. Yeah, it's a tough one. But just finally, just want to mention. Obviously, we spoke about Vanya. It's all of what I've learned from the managers. Everyone I've spoken to, including yourself, we've all learned. I've learned something, and hopefully the viewers and listeners have as well. We've mentioned about Vanya. It's his knowledge of players. He can see those expressions on their face, the body language. And the first time he was talking about there, it was Mbomo at Brentford kept hitting the bar. Some FPL managers would look at that and go, he's going to score soon. Vanya looked at that and went, I'm not touching him. I'm not going near him. because he said if a player keeps doing that, there's something up. And I guess he's just simply not as accurate. And he was speaking in terms of being a player, a midfielder on the pitch, looking at a guy up front hitting the bar every week. Dave, we had on the Meet the Manager as well, set up a family league for managers and their sons and daughters. So it's a family, and so it was something I've spoken about on the Scoutcast. It was that feeling of sort of being. You can use FPL with your family. You needn't be separated, looking at your phone. Oh, who got the assist? And you can bring your family into that if they're into football as well. And so it's got loads of examples of dads there and mums with. I think it's just dads at the moment, so hopefully it's going to be mums as well. And their children playing it, and rivalry and beating the parents, which is good. So that's good.
That's brilliant. That's brilliant, because for me I saw that league and that was really, really good, because for me that kind of like, not only is it about family, but just trying to go back to the heart. This is meant to be fun.
Yes,
so
exactly.
actually, when you are getting upset about Bruno, it is actually meant to be fun in all this. So I think that's a great way.
And there's been an enthusiasm with all the managers we've interviewed, including yourself, but it was Ragaboli's one which really stood out. I think people were quite taken aback about how enthusiastic he was. He is an MIT professor in America, and somehow he is for free creating a massively well-known, well-used website in livefpl.net. Which has transformed how we think about the game, our understanding of FPL, and he's just simply doing that in his spare time. I struggle to make a cup of tea in my spare time, but he's created a massive, popular website. But it was his enthusiasm, his massive enthusiasm for the game, and I was starting to feel a bit down about the game. You were talking about the lack of planning, and I interviewed him. I came away from that going, nope, enthusiasm's back, because. It's infectious enthusiasm. So
and I love all the stuff he's done around that as well. I mean, I was someone who took part in his virtual FPL league. I don't know if you remember that.
I do. Yeah, we spoke about that. Yeah.
But the great thing about him is that he's I've often kind of asked him kind of questions on some of the data points as well, and he's an incredibly busy person, but he always seems to find a way of coming back and helping. Nice. So you can't help but be carried away with that level of enthusiasm for it.
Before we go, we're going to wrap up with looking ahead to game week 23. And I'm going to hesitantly say this. We've got your bus team plus the fixtures. At the time of recording, there haven't been any double game weeks announced. Perhaps during the recording there have been. So there could be a double game week for Villa, possibly with Leeds or Burnley. Possibly, there might not be. So this is as it stands, very much as it stands. That's the caveat there. So what we've got here is your bus team, and we've got the fixtures as they are. So do you want to take us through, and for the benefit of those listening to the podcast as well, take us through your team and your plans for game week 23?
Yeah, sure. So just going through my team, I've got De Gea in goal, and I've got Trent, Cancelo, and Diaz as well in the defence, three at the back, and then in midfield I've got Gundogan. He's still there. Gundogan is still there. Bowen, Rafinha, Saka in midfield, and then up front I've got Ronaldo, Antonio, and Broja as well. And then on the bench I've got Foster, Son, who I've still got there, Dawson, and then Livramento, who we mentioned earlier on as well.
So the two things I'm going to ask is, say for example Villa do get a double game week. What are your plans there? Who would you like to bring in?
I think there's actually quite a few options that have come up on Villa now, and even without the double, they've got some good fixtures coming up. So I do like the looks of Luca Digna in terms of as a defence. So he's someone that I could bring in quite easily for Dawson, for example. He's someone who has hurt me in the past, I think it's fair to say, but there's no doubt, certainly from what he's going to play a more obviously an advanced role. I think Gerrard's got a lot of kind of faith in that position and sees it being quite a creative position for his teams based on his previous work at Rangers. So he's someone I'm looking at. But then in midfield, I think there's some good options. I know everyone's been talking that you can look at. I like Buendia actually. Buendia is the one that's kind of I think not mentioned as much. I thought he looked very good against United, and I think he's benefiting and becoming that player that we all hoped he was going to be at the start of the season. So he's someone that I could look to bring in as well. And then there's my old friend Watkins, talking of hitting the woodwork quite a lot. So he's someone else that I'm thinking of as well. But I think generally, in terms of this week, I'm actually trying to think about next week.
Yeah.
So a lot of my plan is Salah.
Oh, anticipate my next question.
Okay.
Yeah. What's your Salah plan?
So there's basically two routes to it as I see it. So and a lot of it depends on Ronaldo. So he's one that I can do. I can effectively move him down to someone like Watkins or someone else, and then obviously look to upgrade one of the midfielders fairly easily to Salah. So that's one route. The other route is Son. So I could make Son into Salah and again kind of downgrade somewhere else in midfield. Again, without not too much, I can move Gundogan or Saka down to some of those Villa midfielders. So there's two routes, and I'm almost thinking more about that to be honest than this week. I see this week as being one just to get through. I'll probably get. I'm already set myself up for kind of either small red, grey type week. I'm not looking at it as being a big week. But again, if that's without the double, if the double gets announced, then I'll take a hit to get a couple of Villa players in.
Yeah, I mean, I think I also got Ronaldo, and I don't have Salah, and I'm actually resigned to taking a hit. I don't mind with Salah because Salah was a player I'd be getting in for how many weeks have we got left? Pretty much half the season. So he's going to repay me that -4. I'm sure of it. And I can't see myself removing him again. I think the season has proved how much we need him.
Yeah.
Ronaldo to a striker and Mo Salah downwards. And looking at Villa, Watkins, Coutinho. Buendia, great options, and Luca Dean did look the better of the two, but early days.
Well, I was going to ask you your view. Ask your view on Ramsey actually in the Villa because he's obviously very cheap, but he's he looks he could be a fantastic bargain if he keeps on producing the way he is. Is he somebody looking at?
He is. The thing is, I don't need to because I've got about 3 million in the bank.
Okay.
So I'm looking at players like upgrading Livramento to Luca Dean, upgrading a midfielder, maybe Gallagher. Maybe it's time he went. Well, I don't know. He's done me well as well, so I might keep him. But if I was in the mind for a midfield, I would do that. And then the following week, I've got the money, Ronaldo and someone. So I think there are lots of options. But I think if you haven't got the money to stretch to Coutinho or Buendia, then Ramsey's great. It's really great value. He could be the best value anyway. I didn't
realise how low a price he was. I saw him. I think he's at 4.6 now, and I think he could be just someone that could, like say, allow us to free up some funds elsewhere.
I think with Villa's fixtures are so good anyway in general that as we see here, they're playing Everton without a manager. So we'll see how Everton's defence is. But I think they're just so good in general going forward. Before we go, I've got some stats. Expected goal involvement the last 4, and I've stripped out AFCON players. So that's why Salah's not in there. This is the last 4 matches they played, and this indicates perhaps some of the players that you and others might be thinking of. If you haven't got Bowen, get him in. Not too late. His expected goal involvement is the highest amongst all non-AFCON players and non-injured players, and then Lacazette is expected goal involvement very high. Proves how pivotal he is to Arsenal, but he is expensive. Then Kane, Calvert-Lewin. Now Duncan Ferguson has taken over at Everton, so there we go. Perhaps there could be resurgence there. Martinelli at Arsenal, very very cheap and a good Arsenal asset there. They have doubles, trebles, quadruples coming up soon.
Yeah.
Ronaldo's still there. Edouard at Crystal Palace, another good cheap striker. Sterling overlooked, still doing well. De Bruyne, another one as well. Antonio still there. Did get on assist at the weekend, and Alexander Arnold. Every week, I wish I captained him. Every week he does well.
I'd imagine he might be a captain option coming up this week. Actually, I think against Palace.
Yeah.
He's going to be one of those players who's never going to leave anyone's team all season. He's just going to be. Everyone got him in, and he's going to stay there for the full duration. But there's some good players to look at. I mean, Calvert-Lewin is a really interesting one. That, like you say, new big dunk. What's he going to do to Calvert-Lewin? It depends how quickly he can kind of get back. Is he going to get back to that kind of injury, past that injury, and really look like the force he was previously? But he's someone that I think could be good. And also the other player that's not on here, but I think could be good, and very much dependent on whether or not he can ever come back from injury, is Bamford. I think if Bamford can get back from that injury, then he might become a factor, certainly as we go towards the end of the season as well. So
definitely.
Plenty of choice.
In the new look 3-4-3, which may emerge.
Yes.
But in the meantime, Greyhead, it's been fantastic speaking to you about this. It's been really good to get an insight into the great and the good as a sort of a hook to describe our season so far and perhaps where we may go with it, the new narratives that may emerge. It's also been a good chance for me to reflect a bit on the Meet the Manager series so far. We've got plenty more interesting managers to come for the rest of the season, but it's been a good chance to sort of catch up and find out where we are with them, and especially players like you. I mean, you're doing particularly well. Whereabouts are you in the rankings at the moment?
I was up to 800 before this week, so I've just slipped out the 1,000 as it stands at the moment. So, but I'm hoping, like I say, I'm on the free hits. I'm hoping I can get myself back in the top 1,000 by the end of this week, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Well, I was very close to focusing on your team specifically, but then I noticed that Vanya was slightly higher, so I thought I'd go with him, and also because you're talking a lot about other managers as well.
Well, he gives me someone to target, doesn't he? So that's what I always like, someone to aim for. So that'll be good.
But yeah, so it's been really interesting catching up with that and the season so far. But for now, go ahead. Thanks again. Good luck with Game Week 23. Good luck with all the narratives that are to come in this season.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Joe. Pleasure.